in Snowflake. 70% of the town's actually Mormon, and then everybody else is mostly Christian. Maybe 15% of the town were all close cousins to me. On like Friday and Saturday nights, everybody get together and we'd go have like cookouts out like on my grandpa's range, all my cousins would. We'd have big bonfires and cook Dutch oven and then go like hear stories about my grandpa or about like our family and settling Snowflake and how awesome our heritage was and how great it was that we were flakes from Snowflake. Like, I don't know how to distinguish, like growing up, where the church was and where my life was and where my family life was and where like even school. It was all so connected to the church that my life revolved, it was just my Mormon life.
It was always pretty much just my mom and us kids. My dad would fly to Washington, D.C. every Monday morning and fly home every Friday night. Though my dad was gone, every morning at 6 a.m. my mom would wake us all up, and over the speakerphone we would have scripture study. My dad would sit in his office and we would all gather around our speakerphone in the kitchen and we would read the scriptures together as a family. I can tell you that I was alone a lot, and I did get lonely. I don't know, I was always kind of more of a independent kid.
My extended family's Mormon. My early experiences in the world were framed in these Mormon colored glasses. I remembered very clearly when I was baptized and like the really happy moments I had in church. And there are many, like I would be lying if I said there never was. I knew when I was 7, like that's the earliest time I can remember thinking like, I'm not like other boys. Like I wasn't like my cousins. I remember hearing adults talk about the homosexuals and like how no, they'll never be accepted and they're so bad. I remember being 12, being told this, you gotta start preparing for mission. You gotta start reading the scriptures every day. You gotta start getting ready to pay tithing. I remember like in Utah, when we lived in Utah, we'd go out for breakfast on Sunday morning. We'd sit in the smoking section in our church clothes and then we'd go to church. That was going to church to me when I was a little kid, but when I was 11 or 12, then it was like, no, now we have to be the real Mormon family. And that's when I remember the appearance of Mormonism. Like we're a happy married couple, these are our happy kids, we pay tithing, we go to church, we go to the temple, which my parents didn't do. But it was then is when it started to become really important.
If you can understand a people so tolerant, so forgiving, so Christian, you will have unlocked the key to what a Latter-day Saint is.
I really liked going outside. I loved fishing. That was one of the times where I actually enjoyed doing things with my dad. He would come home from work and like on a Saturday and say that he's like, hey, you want to go fishing? And so we get the boat or just take the fishing rods and drive up to the forest and throw our lines out and try to catch fish. That's like that's the things I really remember like growing up. And then that was also the same time where I realized that I had sexual thoughts, or like thoughts like gay thoughts. It was 5th grade. I remember exactly the day because I was like, oh, like I don't think this is right, or whatever. And I was like in my head, I was thinking like I've got a problem. And didn't talk to anybody about it. And I think that made it difficult for me to really connect and really open up to anyone in my family and any of my friends, because I was just like, everything was the church. I remember when it was 7th or 8th grade that I really tried to fix, like I really like thought like I've got a problem. I'm like a huge sinner and I really need to change. I felt like the church definitely was gonna look down on me if I talked to him about it. As long as I didn't bring it up, I didn't talk about it, then I felt fine going to church. I felt comfortable. I would sit in church or sit like reading my scriptures, just thinking like, okay, I'm a good kid. I'm focusing and I try to study the scriptures. And then always in the back of my mind, there was the thought of, okay, so is God helping me with this? I would never say anything about me being gay because I was like, if somebody finds out about this, I thought I was gonna be so much trouble. I was going to hell.
I mean, I can remember before moving when I was maybe 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, having those kind of feelings or those kind of attractions, but it wasn't concerning for me. When I moved, being LDS was the majority. It was then that it almost became a hell. I was surrounded by these people that were so apparently righteous, and they would look down on me. I was made fun of from the time I was in elementary school through high school. Starting to realize that it really set me apart, that was when it started to become a big concern. So it was about the time I was probably 12, maybe 11, 12, around that time that I started really thinking about it and kind of trying to figure out what it was that made me different. And I mean, I guess more in the line of kind of trying to accept it, because really all along I knew it was just more of an accepting thing, and it wasn't until I was 14 or so that I could actually vocalize it.
Through high school, the mission was never a part of my plan. I remember one day, probably right after high school, I was home by myself and the New Era came, the church magazine, the New Era, and it was all about going on a mission. And I remember I was home alone. I remember sitting looking at it going, yeah, I guess I'll thumb through it. And it showed me a different side of what being a missionary would be. There were stories in it about missionaries doing service projects and helping people build houses. And I was like, oh, I think this is nice. I like that. I could do that. I didn't realize it was this too. I just thought it was knocking on doors all day and being annoying. And I was one of those missionaries too that thought that going on a mission twofold was, one, it would fix me. Somehow by dedicating these 2 years to God, that I would prove myself worthy to be, fixed and normal. And the second was that I knew for at least 2 years nobody would bug me about why I didn't have a girlfriend. I could just be like, well, I'm a missionary. 2 years of easy, no questions asked. But it was like a ticking time bomb the entire time, because the closer it got, then that 2 years is over. You have a little window of time where people will still not bother you, but then you hit that part where, are you dating somebody? Are you getting married soon? And what did your mission president say about getting married?
I still felt completely connected to the church. I felt like that was my life, that was my everything. I had to be a part of the church. That was my family, that was Snowflake, that was my heritage. Everything about my life was my family, my heritage. So I went on my mission for that reason, because I was like, the church told me go on a mission, and I was going to go on a mission. And I went to Brazil and was out on my mission, and I struggled out there because it was hard. And then I was thinking, I can't deal with the church. I was completely lonely, and I felt like I've never been in a depression. I didn't feel like a real depression in my life, and I got into the first time I really felt depressed. That was the first time I started kind of doubting the church a little bit, and doubting that this may not work for me, because I've tried to give everything to God, and it's just not working. And over the next 3 or 4 months when I was home, I convinced myself again that I could do it, that I can be a member of the church and work through my feelings and get over being gay. When I really disconnected myself from thinking that the church was going to be my life, which was 2 years ago, I started thinking, what if the church isn't right? What if, I just played the what if game. I was like, what if I'm putting myself through this torture when I should just enjoy life? And what if being gay is fine? In November, I became friends with Matt and we started dating, and then I realized that with dating him, I was gonna have to tell people.
So it was Christmas night, and we had just come home from our family party, and my mom had come in to say goodnight to me, and I've been waiting for her, and when she came in to say goodnight, I guess I was kind of dramatic, and I don't know, I thought everything was so serious, and so, like typical for movies, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I think you should sit down for this, and she sat and she was like thinking, okay, what's going on? And I immediately started crying, and I told her, Mom, trying to figure out, and I had been rehearsing in my head the words to say this, and so I just said, Mom, I think that I'm attracted to guys. And surprisingly, she really was very stoic. My mom told me that I was just going through a phase, and that it was just curiosity, and every boy goes through a phase where they're curious and then want to explore and things like that, and that I would get over it. And so for a time, I trusted my mom, and I believed that that was true. I let that go for time, and it was a couple of years after that that I ended up coming out to my dad and telling him, just because he was giving me a personal priesthood interview and asked all the right questions, and it came out.
21, probably right after I got home. Summer. I got home in March, and it was probably this summer, late summer of 2003. I was going up to Salt Lake a lot to visit my friends that I had met in Russia, who were from Utah, from Salt Lake. And I remember very clearly landing one time and staring, like, the plane landed, and I was looking out the window, and downtown Salt Lake was right here. And whatever that little voice is in your head, or whatever you want to call it, your conscious, whatever, clear as day said, like, you can't keep running from this, you have to deal with this. And then, like, I saw, like, the clock ticking down, like, for sure, like, oh my God, I can't keep up this fake life thing anymore.
Rumors started spreading that I was hanging out with Matt, who is gay. My mom was calling me saying, like, what are you doing? There's not one single person that I'm gonna talk to that's gonna find out about this that's gonna be okay with it. I was scared. I was really scared.
I was 23, so it was 2 years after Russia. I had gone back to Russia, actually, to go to school. And I went there for half a semester. And when I came home, I went back to the Starbucks that I had been working at before I had gone back to go to school. And when I went in to talk to her, there was this new guy there who I wasn't there when I worked there before he would, at some point, had come in while I was gone. And I just remember thinking he was so cute. So we worked together a couple times, and then he had just moved to Phoenix from San Diego, so we were both kind of new. We just started hanging out a lot more, and he was probably one of the first openly gay people that I knew, and I really was admired his life and he wasn't fearful of the world in ways that I was. And so we hung out a couple times, and I remember, like, we were hanging out at his apartment one time after, like, weeks of going out to dinner and movies and swimming and just hanging out, and I was like, are we dating? And he kind of looked at me like a loaded question, and he's like, well, I thought so. And then it was the first time, though, that I had ever met somebody seriously that I was really thrilled to be with, that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted people to know. I wanted to introduce him to my family. It was getting to that point too where it was too hard to explain, how come you're always hanging out with this guy?
Like, I could physically remember from 5th grade till 25, like, giving everything I possibly could to changing, and it wasn't working, and just feeling disconnected from my family at that point. So I remember just crying to my sister and telling her that I wished I wasn't gay, and I wanted to feel good, but I was sick of torturing myself. I was sick of letting my feelings from the church and letting bishops and stake presidents and the prophets and of the church like tell me that I've got a problem.
The family is ordained of God. Marriage between man and woman is essential to His eternal plan. We further declare that God has commanded that the sacred powers of procreation are to be employed only between man and woman lawfully wedded as husband and wife.
I called my mom and my dad and talked to him on the phone and told them that I was gay. They acted completely surprised. They kept asking why I thought I was gay, and they started getting really angry.
People are always amazed to know that I came out at such a young age, but I was never one to lie to my parents. I was very upfront with them about everything. There were times where my mom asked me to stop confessing sins to her because I was telling her everything.
All of my life, I wanted the approval of my family. I wanted the approval of my parents, of my mom and my dad, and I just wanted approval. I felt like from, I don't know. I really wanted to find just be accepted. And my dad cried and told me he felt like he was losing his son.
I mean, my mom was my best friend. But yeah, and then when I came into my dad, it was just, I don't know. I didn't see any need for me to lie, and it just seemed normal to tell him when he was asking the right questions. I mean, from the time I was probably 12 until the time I was 20, I mean, I spent hours and hours on my knees praying and asking for God to forgive me. And I knew in my heart that my family would go to heaven, but I would go to hell and I would be alone. I kind of realized that then what hell really was, and hell to me was an eternity without the family and the people that I love. I mean, I don't even know how, looking back, how I was able to put on a pretty good face about it, but I mean, I know I spent hours, I was constantly in despair. And that was probably the reason, because I felt so guilty all the time and feeling the need to confess always. Repentance became second nature to me. For me, the despair and the guilt, it became so second nature that it was almost just like I figured either weekly or monthly I'd be going to see my bishop.
I took my mom out to lunch first before I told her, because my parents are divorced. She's not stupid. She was well aware of what was going on. She was kind of twisting my arm to get me to tell her. Up to that point, I had 23 years to think about it and to deal with it and to finally be okay to say it. She really had 23 seconds to deal with her vision of what I would be and what I would do, and my future life as getting married and having kids. All of a sudden to her, it was just gone. She's so awesome now, really has grown, and she loves my other half, as I call him. So when my dad was in town, there was a lot going on. I was graduating from ASU, and same situation that he was like, "Who's this guy you're hanging out with all the time?" I knew what my mom was going to do. He was, oh God, I don't know. So when I told him, he kind of sighed and looked down and looked up at me, and he said, "I always hoped this day wouldn't come, but now that it's here, it's not so bad." And that was the last thing I thought he would say. Ever since then, he's been awesome too. And it actually brought us closer together because I didn't have to lie about who I was anymore.
Even today, I still have the feelings and thoughts that I don't fit into my family heritage. I'm a flake from Snowflake who doesn't fit with what majority of all the other flakes think. It was hard for me to hear my mom tell me that like I couldn't bring people home. They tell me that they love me, but I know that they don't want to talk about me being gay. Right now, they're upset that I'm so open about it.
Being raised, even though like my dad being a conservative politician, my dad was always very tolerant and very open-minded. My dad taught me, and very different from I think most Mormon families' teaching, my dad taught me that my leaders, he taught me to always remember that the church leaders were men. That they might have been called by God, but they weren't God. And that they didn't have they were not the first authority over me, that I was. And he taught me that I should follow my own guide, I should follow my own spirit before, and that personal revelation was key. I think all along, interestingly enough, my guilt was more stemmed from the fact that more not really even that I don't want to upset God, because I never really knew who God was. It was more of I don't want to upset my parents. I think if anything, just seeing my mom's sadness was what made it the worst, what made it even worse for me.
I learned a lot growing up Mormon, but if anything I learned for sure was taking a stand on issues that are not popular and hard, and I felt that I had to take a stand on this issue, that the Mormon Church was absolutely wrong with Prop 8 and they didn't deserve me or my talents or my ideas. I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and subconsciously, I guess, my subconscious said, just send in the letter and be done. And I woke up really with the gasp, like somebody had died. And for a few days after that, I felt like I was mourning that loss. Up to Prop 8, I had been writing about Prop 8 and why it was wrong, and Mormon history, and I kind of guess felt that if I didn't resign, that there would be that impending danger hanging over me, that they were going to come after me and excommunicate me. So when it was finally done and over, I just moved forward, knowing I wanted to be an advocate and that I wanted to be a voice and to speak and to tell my story, because I knew it from the inside and now I was seeing it from the outside.
When I hear about things in the community that others are doing for equality, for like the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, for ENDA, for any rallies that are going on, I go down to quite a few of them. I wouldn't say I go to all of them, but I go to quite a few of them just to really educate myself more about what's going on, and then to show support. And then I write about the stuff on Facebook. I'll bring things up on Facebook. I make sure that that my friends and my family all know that I'm gay.
I am working with the Log Cabin Republicans, so trying to really just push gay rights within the Republican Party.
I'm feeling a lot better now that I am gay and I'm a flake, and that there's other people that come from the same heritage that I did, the same growing up, the same background, that are gay.
20 years of shame, I'll take that for another 60 of a happy life.
That same Lucifer who was cast out of our Father's presence is still at work. He with his angels who followed him will trouble the work of the Lord and destroy it if they can. But we will stay on course. We will anchor ourselves as families, as a church, to these principles and ordinances. Whatever tests lie ahead, and they will be many, we must remain faithful and true.
Growing up as a gay Mormon boy, it's probably different now for younger kids, but when I was a kid, I didn't know any gay people. So you just kind of grow up in this really fearful second guessing and always thinking ahead to not say something gay, or not to appear. And so I made a very I made the decision that I wanted to be that voice that I didn't ever have. I don't know why you'd want to be part of an organization that fundamentally hates you.
How am I visible? Please tell me.